Hello. Can I just say, I love North Carolina. I love you guys. Can I move here? I couldn't have imagined a more perfect day. I mean, it was warm, hot, sun was shining. I got to hang out with a bunch of cool farmers, talk high tunnels, build a high tunnel, tour the countryside in Hillsborough. It's pretty beautiful around here. And then to top it off with this really delicious meal. So this Mainer feels like I received an incredibly warm Southern welcome. So thank you. So this past January, I traveled to sunny California to attend the second Agrarian Elders Convocation. This was a week-long gathering that was co-organized by my father, farming elder Eliot Coleman, and farmer and advocate Michael Abelman. We were staying in Big Sur, which was this hippie eco resort. We had hot springs and meditation yurts, but we were all incredibly grateful to have a quiet break from the business and doings of farming. The first gathering 2 years prior consisted of 24 of North America's farming pioneers, and all of whom had been farming for at least 35 years. But this time, half of us were elders, and the other half were farming youngers, all personally selected by the elders. As I walked the grounds on the first day, I noticed hundreds of monarch butterflies flying above me in the eucalyptus trees. And I saw a sign, and it read that Big Sur is actually one of the wintering grounds for the monarchs, and that it takes them 2 to 3 generations to actually fly from their summer locations to their wintering grounds, all the while sort of transferring and carrying the memories and the knowledge of the previous generation. So fittingly, the topic of farm legacies and farmer succession was the #1 issue that we discussed that week. And it's what set me down a path to actually return to my family's farm in Maine to better understand how to build a sustainable farming legacy. So you may be wondering, what exactly does a sustainable farming legacy mean? I believe that a sustainable farming life not only derives its meaning from the sustainable and ecological methods that we practice, but also from the connections between generations. And this value is grounded in the idea of legacy. Ecologists actually know that a young tree grows better when growing next to an established stand of older trees. The roots of the young saplings are able to follow pathways created by the older trees in order to anchor themselves more deeply in the ground. And that allows the entire forest community to thrive and endure. So to me, this is a perfect analogy for building a sustainable farming legacy. It's an interdependent and an invisible connection between individuals and resources, which acts like a support system across time. But it's dependent on the foundation of the farmers who have come before us, and it requires a responsibility to the farmers who will follow in our footsteps. So with all the numerous challenges and issues facing farmers today, why does the notion of creating a sustainable farming legacy really matter to us today? Because more and more young farmers who don't have family ties to agriculture or land are starting farming. And I think they need our support more now than ever. And where I come from up north in New England, only 1 in 10 farmers of retiring age have a successor farming alongside. Before I returned to my family's farm this summer, my father could have been part of that statistic. Since I was the only one of his kids who's been farming, his farming legacy and the land that he so carefully nurtured for the last 50 years could have been in jeopardy, and it may have had a very uncertain future. The humbling realization that I could be depriving him of the next generation, his own grandsons, from experiencing a meaningful farming life and the chance to build the connections between generations was enough motivation for me to uproot my city life at the time and return to the land where I was born to begin farming alongside him. So my family's farming story actually begins 50 years earlier on the coast of Maine in a tiny town of Harborside. And this is what it looked like back then. The farm started out as 60 acres, rocky land with only 2 inches of topsoil, and thick spruce trees. My mother and father, they cleared this by hand, and they built a one-room farmhouse. They were pioneers during this time, considered back to the landers. And many people followed in their footsteps. They wanted to get a taste of the simple, good life that they had been able to carve out of the Maine woods. My sisters and I were born on this land and in that farmhouse. And we were part of the magic of the farm. But sadly, the strains of a subsistence lifestyle and my sister Heidi's drowning in the farm pond broke our family apart. And the farm lay dormant for almost 13 years. Fortunately, my father had the means and foresight to hold on to the land, and the farm came back to life as Four Season Farm in the early 90s with my stepmother, Barbara. And now, the farm has become an inspiring example of four-season production for small-scale farmers in a northern climate, with over hundreds of farmers and visitors each year. And this is what it looks like today. So while I like to say that I grew up learning farming through osmosis, I didn't immediately become a farmer. I resisted it for a really long time. And I really spent a lot of years trying to get away from my farming roots. As a kid growing up in the 80s, farming wasn't quite so popular or trendy as it is now. And a profession, was definitely more challenging. So it wasn't hard to escape my background and go pursue other non-farming interests. So I spent much of my 20s ski bumming, raft guiding, sea kayak guiding, working for an internet startup. I even worked as an escrow assistant for a title company, so definitely a far cry from farming. But during that time, I always had an affinity for growing plants and enjoying good food. And I also couldn't avoid the fact that I share an uncanny resemblance with my dad. So it was pretty much fated that eventually I would become a farmer. But I really did resist it for a long time. And it wasn't until I had my 2 boys, Bodie and Hayden, that I began farming in 2008. And my partner Robbie and I started Divide Creek Farm in Colorado. We inspired our community by applying all of the principles that my father had developed in Maine, in Colorado. And we successfully produced veggies year-round using high tunnels, movable high tunnels, and other season extension techniques. My sister Melissa even liked to joke that our farm should really be called Four Season Farm West. It was also an inspiring place to raise my kids. And they thrived just like the vegetables that we grew in compost-rich soil. But family history has a funny way of repeating itself sometimes. And although my partner and I poured our heart and soul into building this farm independently, somehow we lacked the maturity and the insight to strengthen the connections between us and within our farm family. So sadly, the farm fell apart after we separated. Sometimes I regret that it took me 40 years, with a lot of heartache and detours in between, to come back to my family's farm. But now I know that it took leaving the farm before I appreciated my roots enough to come back. And while I don't have all the answers yet on how to build a sustainable farming life, the experiences and the wisdom that I have gained so far have served me incredibly well during the last 2 months of farming with my father. He has been overjoyed with my return, and he likes to joke that now he can not just enjoy one glass of wine at lunch, but two. So, and he is spending more of his time now building infrastructure, as he likes to call it, which is essentially these huge compost piles that he layers with seaweed and old plant matter and sheep manure and a farm favorite, crab waste. Every afternoon for the last 2 months, he has been driving his pickup truck 30 minutes away to nearby Deer Isle to go meet his crab ladies, to pick up 4 large trash cans of picked-through crab waste that normally would be dumped into the dump. He trades vegetables and good conversation with his crab ladies in exchange for this incredibly stinky compost ingredient. The farm employees and I like to joke that there's nothing quite like waking up to the smell of wafting, rotting crab before we begin work in the morning. And even the seagulls have discovered the bounty if we haven't covered it soon enough. They're known to swoop down, pick up the shells with their beaks, and then go and drop them on top of the neighbors' cars to break them open. So, needless to say, we make great neighbors. So far, I think we actually farm really well together, but it does still take a lot of patience and trust in each other, and acceptance that we never really will see things eye to eye. But for me to be able to ride on the tractor early in the morning to go down to the beach, harvest seaweed with my dad, to be able to laugh at my boys as they kiss the chickens, and ultimately to witness the smile and joy on my boy's face when late at night we'll go out with headlamps with my dad into the hoop coop, as we call it, to try to train the young layers to perch not on the ground, but on the roost. Makes my heart explode 100 times over. And I know that I am on the right path to creating a sustainable farming legacy. So, I want to leave all of you with this short video that was actually produced by my former partner, Robbie, and accompanied by the beautiful voice of my friend Caroline. This is a 4-season farm as it is today. 3 generations now, the young saplings and the wise old oaks, all supporting one another. And I want all of you to think to yourselves, how are you building your sustainable farming legacies? And what are you doing to help support the next generation to follow in your footsteps?